business is approval of minutes of the January 19th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for approval. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. The other item on the agenda this evening is a communication from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation on the status of the I94 East-West Corridor study. At this time, I will turn the meeting over to our Chief Engineer, Pete Daniels.
Okay, I think we have several people from WSDOT on the line. I think if Beth wants to go ahead and share her PowerPoint, and Brian Bleisner, I think, is going to go through this.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Brian Bleisner from WSDOT. I'm the Southeast Freeway Chief. With me today, Beth Foy, one of our consultant partners, Jeff Bauer, also from our consultant team, and then Josh Levesque, who's our project manager, and Bill Moore, who's our project supervisor. So thanks for the opportunity to share some things today. We've got a short PowerPoint, and then we're open to questions, obviously. So a little bit on our agenda. We want to give you today a little bit of our project background, some information about issues and equity. We'll go through our preferred alternative as was identified back in 2016, and then talk in a little bit more detail about the Washington Street extension, which is one of our major mitigation projects as part of the project. So project background. Project itself is a corridor study on I94, connecting the work that was done with the zoo interchange to the work that was done at the Marquette. So the intent of this project is to reconstruct the freeway between those two major interchanges. It goes from 70th Street on the west to 16th Street on the east. And then we go up and down the Miller Parkway area, up and down 175 a little bit. The project is technically in the city of Milwaukee, but obviously very close to West Dallas, Wauwatosa, and West Milwaukee. So the project need, this is 1960 era's infrastructure. So the pavement and bridges are near their end of their useful life. We do have a pretty significant safety problem on the corridor. Our average crash rate is 2 to 3 times higher than the statewide average. And then we certainly want a freeway that works hand in hand with a very crowded local street system. And that's certainly the case in West Dallas, where we've got lots of traffic going up and down the parallel routes on Greenfield and National Avenue. We want to, as I said earlier, we want to improve the freeway and make that connection between the zoo, the improvements of the zoo, and the improvement at the Marquette. And really the intent there is to get the full value of those previous investments by making these improvements. And last but not least, we've got a pretty significant congestion problem out there today. The pandemic has had some effects, but we're still seeing a lot of traffic. So the corridor itself is got a lot of, it's an interstate highway, I-94, so it's got statewide importance, but it's also important from a regional perspective. If you stand in the middle of the stadium interchange and draw a 5-mile radius around you, you've encompassed 26% of the people, 32% of the jobs, and 41% of the businesses in the 7-county region. So it's a very centrally located artery that a lot of people access for jobs and businesses. You know, one of the impressions we get is this route is really just for suburbanites in Waukesha County to get downtown. And it's really just the data doesn't support that perception. We really have a lot of local traffic that are using the freeway itself to get to places locally. 76% of our trips in the corridor start or end within the corridor itself. So, for example, if the corridor is being used, if you're living in UWM and you're trying to get to the Summit Place office complex, or if you live in Story Hill and you work near on the east side near UWM, this is the freeway. This is the section of highway that's being used, and those are all locally based trips for people to get to and from their locally either homes or businesses. So the remaining 24% of the trips use the corridor as a throughput. So again, if you're living on the east side down in Bayview and you work out in Tosa at Freighter, that those types of trips are also being taken by I-94. But the improvements to safety and the reduction in congestion along I-94 will make it more convenient and safer for people to access the area immediately around the freeway. And it'll make it easier for local residents to use I-94 to access opportunities both within and outside the corridor. So from a traffic perspective, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a new dynamic. We've got a pandemic that started last March. We've done some initial analysis of how that's affected our traffic volumes. So we've taken weekly counts on the freeway starting back. Well, we've been taking them for quite a while, but kind of starting back in March of 2020 and going through early 21 here, we did obviously find a very significant drop in traffic, right after that Safer at Home order back in March. The AM and PM peak volumes dropped by about 45%. So that was very significant. Overall daily volumes dropped about 50%. And then right after that, starting in about May, the volume started to grow back gradually through May through September. They've rebounded a bit, and they've been relatively consistent since about October of 2020. The AM peak hour, which is our commuting hour, is down about 10%, but the overall peak period, which is about 2.5 to 3 hours in the morning, is down about 15%. In the PM, similarly, the PM peak hour has returned actually to pre-pandemic volumes. So we're seeing in the afternoon, our volumes are very, very close to where they were before the pandemic. And the overall peak period, interestingly, has shifted a little bit. So it's actually a little bit later in the day than it has been before. But it's very close to those total volumes. And then I did want to, so how to measure the pandemic effects on traffic, and is this going to be long lasting? Is this a short term? One of the things we did to try to answer that is we looked at a sensitivity analysis. So we took the volumes that we're seeing out there, and we said, how much of a reduction would we really need to really dramatically affect the capacity issues that we're seeing? And it's a pretty simple calculation, actually. You go from needing 4 lanes and to needing only 3 lanes, you need a 25% reduction in traffic volumes. Right now, as I said earlier, the AM peak hour is down about 10%, and the PM peak is back to normal. So we're not seeing that 25% reduction that we would need to eliminate the need for additional capacity. So right now we're saying, based on the data we have and the sensitivity analysis that we've done, that capacity expansion continues to be justified. So we restarted the study. Many of you that have been around for a little bit know that this corridor was studied from 2013 to 2016. We actually got through the environmental process on this corridor. So our goal now is to kind of get back to where we were back in 2016. We had a record of decision, which is the Federal Highway approval of the environmental impact statement and their concurrence with our decision. We had that back in 2016, and our goal is to get back to that same point. So we're trying to confirm what was previously established. That preferred alternative, including the Washington Street, is kind of where we're starting. We did want to make sure that everybody understood that the double deck, which was very controversial and was considered during the last study period, is not being considered anymore. The double deck option is at the cemetery right next to AmFam Field is not part of the preferred alternative, and it's not being reconsidered. We also wanted to emphasize a couple new opportunities that we thought we had with our restart of the study. One is to look at from a different perspective, look at the technical, the transit issue, and how can the project, from a mitigation standpoint, maybe capitalize on some transit opportunities that we have in the corridor. So we've established a transit technical advisory committee that is started to meet and is starting to talk about what possible options from a transit perspective the project could look at funding. And then we've also wanted to make sure that we emphasize in a better and a different way the disadvantaged business opportunities and workforce development opportunities that are part of the project. Potentially this is a several $100 million project, and there's a lot of work to be done, and we want to make sure that those opportunities are available to the people of the community nearby once the project is approved. Just to go in a little bit more detail, so we are looking at the mitigation opportunities. As I said earlier, the transit opportunities. We're hoping to identify some additional mitigation that was not part of the original recommendation as part of our reevaluation process, and specifically looking at transit as an opportunity to mitigate some of the impacts from the project. And we're also working hand in hand with the department's disadvantage advisory committee. And so we're working with our business advisory committee to work on those DBE issues and workforce development issues. Where we issues of equity, where we left off, the world, not only from a pandemic perspective, but the issue of equity is certainly looked at much differently than it was just a few short years ago. So one of the things that we're emphasizing, one of the things that Governor Evers wants us to make sure that we're emphasizing is the issue of equity and how the project deals with it. So we're trying to be very intentional in how we listen to stakeholders and other elected officials, community and business leaders from a perspective of equity. The department is learning to recognize. I wouldn't say that we're there yet, but we're learning to recognize the lack of economic opportunity creates poverty, and mitigation strategies to improve transit will improve the equity issues. And we want to make sure that we understand that, and the community understands that large freeway projects can offer business and employment opportunities. The department has an equity and inclusion plan now. That process has started, and it was in reaction to Governor Evers' executive order that every department at the state level create an equity and inclusion plan, which we've got the first draft of that, and the planning process continues. So when we talk about DBE firms and opportunities, that's a few years away because it's really greatly associated with the construction phase of the project, and we're not there yet. But what we like to talk about is what our experience in providing opportunities and the types of things that DBE firms have performed on the Zoo Interchange and the Mitchell Interchange and the Marquette. So we've got a pretty good track record of providing opportunities to DBE firms, and lots of companies have worked and worked on those projects and been very successful. So this is a list of all those firms just from the Zoo Interchange. Lots of DBE firms working in important ways. So with that, Josh, am I turning it over to you? I'm sorry.
Yes, you are. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Brian. So I'm going to touch on the design of the I94 itself and the other projects that go with I94. The first slide here is a higher level overview of the interstate improvements. So the project's a full reconstruct of I94 from approximately 70th Street to 16th Street. Highlighting some of the major design changes here. We're going to add a fourth lane in each direction throughout the mainline I94. And then highlighting some of the interchanges. So the 60th/70th Street interchange, it'll remain a similar configuration as it is today. So a split diamond interchange. Hawley Road interchange has quite a bit of changes. We're going to be maintaining access to and from the west only. So access to and from the east, the ramps to and from the east would be eliminated, and that is to avoid impacts to the cemetery. For the stadium interchange, the design is similar to the Marquette and Zoo interchanges, where we're moving all the exits to right hand instead of having the left hand exits. And the stadium interchange this one will have 4 levels. as opposed to the existing, which has 3 levels. With the bottom level, we'll be extending the local roads, which are 44th and 46th Street, to accommodate brewer traffic. And then lastly, the 35th Street and 27th Street interchanges, those will remain similar to the configuration they're in today. A little bit about the breakdown of the cost for the preferred alternative. So costs were previously calculated as part of the final EIS from 2017. Those will be updated as part of our reval that we're working on right now. And a little bit of the breakdown, approximately 10 to 12% of the total project cost is related to adding the 4th lane in each direction. 35% of the cost is related to the replacement of the pavement and bridges. And then lastly, over 50% of the cost is associated with the various safety and design improvements that we're completing as part of the project. Next slide, please. A little bit more on the west alternative, the west segment alternative. So we do have one area on I94 adjacent to the cemetery where we're going to have less than 12-foot driving lanes and narrow shoulders. It's approximately a 2,000-foot segment from Hawley Road to Zablocki Drive to avoid an encroachment to the adjacent cemeteries. The most narrow segment is will have 11-foot lanes and 2-foot shoulders, but that's only a very short 30 feet in distance, with each side being transitions. And again, this is to avoid impacts to the cemeteries, so no impacts to graves with this alternative. And then again, like I mentioned, east and west of the cemeteries, the freeway would transition back to the standard 12-foot lanes and 12-foot shoulders. And then again, as mentioned, the 60th and 70th Street interchange would be similar to today. And then the Hawley Road interchange would be what's called a half diamond interchange with access only to and from the west. Next slide, please. A little bit on the off-freeway accommodations. In order to help facilitate traffic, I guess during and after construction, we're going to have some work being done off-freeway as well. The bigger one is the Washington Street extension, which I'll touch on the next slide. And then you'll see a couple other areas here, 70th and Greenfield, National Avenue and Greenfield intersection. And then also the Miller Parkway National Avenue intersection, in which we would be making various geometric and traffic signal updates in order to better facilitate traffic off of the freeway. So Washington Street, this is the reason for this is we're trying to better accommodate traffic that's impacted by the changes with the Hawley Road interchange that I discussed. So a little bit about the Washington Street right now. It is just a stub off of 70th Street, which just goes a couple blocks east. So what we're going to be doing as part of this project, we're going to be extending Washington Street, and you can see it drawn on the slide here in yellow. So we're extending Washington Street to continue further east. You can see there's the best fit curve that we came up with to avoid impacts as much as possible and for better access. So that roadway would be extended all the way to 60th, and that would help with traffic, trying to go to and from 60th to 70th Street, in order to make up for what the changes in access on the freeway. So I guess that's one area that we're going to be looking at earlier in the study as part of preliminary design. Also wanted to add is there's one relocation as part of this project, and it's actually our building. So you see the West Dallas sign shop here for Wistot's building. So that one would be relocated, and we're currently looking into options for relocation for that building. So next slide, please. And I believe this is the last one. This is our anticipated schedule. We're hoping to finalize the environmental impact statement and record of decision by mid to late 2021. That's only if a supplemental EIS is not necessary. If that is necessary, we have a little more work to do on the environmental side, so that could delay the record of decision by about a year. So if that's the case, we'd be looking at mid to late 2022. Also looking into enumeration and funding for the project as early as 2021, and then that would allow us to begin preliminary and final design. And then as far as a construction timeframe, that's based on funding. Could start as early as late 2023 or early 2024. And then the main portion of construction would likely be 3 to 4 years long. And again, that depends on funding availability as we go. I believe that's all we had. So we can go ahead and open it up to questions unless Brian or others had anything else.
No, yeah, we're open to questions now.
I have a question. This is Alderman Lysick. Assuming you start in 2023 as per your schedule, what would be the schedule for starting Washington Street? Would that be at the beginning of the project, the end of the project, or the middle of the project?
Yeah, I think obviously lots of important decisions have to be made in terms of, when we start. But yeah, right now our plan would be is to kind of go from west to east. The west end of the project is a little cleaner from a real estate perspective. And one of the main advantages of having Washington Street is that it would provide that connection before the construction on the freeway. So actually Washington Street is going to be one of our very first priorities from a implementation standpoint. So yeah, so as early as 23, as Josh just mentioned, hopefully right around there.
Thank you. Any of the other alderpersons have any questions?
Yeah,
Alderman Weigel.
Mr. Chair, Alderman Weigel here. Are these lane width decisions and the Holly Road intersection truncation, those are all made already? Those are all set in stone, correct?
As much as I would love to say it's set in stone, it's not. I mean, that's the process we're going through here. We had a record of decision that decided that, but we are reevaluating that decision, and so we start where we left off with those decisions. We still think they're pretty good decisions, but we are open to input and open to revision. That's part of the process.
Yeah, because it was my understanding it was the Walker administration who made the decision about not touching the cemetery. Never mind that graves were moved when the freeway was built in the first place, and that that 11-foot lane and the 2-foot shoulder, that just frightens me there. And obviously the impacts on the city of West Dallas and the Holly Road thing. I'd rather see the Holly Road intersection stay as it is. I'd rather see full 12-foot lanes if we have to go to 4 lanes in each direction. I was kind of hopeful that maybe the Evers administration would revisit those decisions as part of this process now. And if that does happen, I don't know that they will, but would that change your schedule also? And I think that would negate the need for the Washington Street issue then, right? If I'm just picturing right now, if I worked at Renaissance Fair over there, where Tensa Controls was in the old Sam's Club, for everybody knows. And if I wanted to go to downtown Milwaukee under this new plan, I'd have to go south to Washington, west on Washington to 70th Street. I'm on 60th, have to go west on Washington to 70th, and then north and get back on the freeway. When my whole intention was to go east all along. I just don't. It's still going to have an impact, I think, on the value of a lot of that property on Holly Road there, or 60th Street in the city of West Dallas. Those are my questions, and those are my real concerns on this project. So, thank you.
Yeah, your comment about schedule, it would kick in a full supplemental EIS because we'd be significantly changing the alternative. So the schedule would not. Josh shared our hopeful, optimistic schedule, and I would say if we're going to revisit, and suggest that we might be hitting graves, that would complicate our environmental quite a bit, and so we would be adding significant time until we could be ready for construction. But we appreciate the input. I mean, that's as I said, that's one of the reasons we're here. We're trying to make sure that we gather all that again.
President Lysick wrote,
Alderman Root.
this would be to the expressway people, with the 11-foot lanes, that would be touching and no reinterring of any graves, correct?
Right, that's the goal of there was two basic ways to get through that area without touching graves. One was the double deck, which Governor Evers has said we're not going to reconsider. And then the second one was the squeezing down to the 11-foot lanes. So that's right. We're not touching graves right now with the preferred alternative.
What would 12 feet do?
Well, 12 feet would add, there's 8 lanes there. So it would add 8 feet to the width, and that would go into the cemeteries. I mean, I'm not sure the number of graves it would hit, but it would definitely be hitting graves.
Okay, that was my question. Is what would the impact be grave wise?
Yeah, I think you could probably surmise it's that very first row on the north and the south. So I'm not sure offhand how many that is, but it's a pretty significant number. There's some evidence that there's graves right up to the fence line there. So any movement into the cemeteries would hit graves.
And that would be the unmarked graves. Is that what you're alluding to? When you
Yes.
said there's
Yeah.
unknowns up to the, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, Reinke,
Alderperson Reinke.
Brian, has a decision been made about the size of the Washington Street roadway as yet?
No, that's as the freeway. It's no final decision yet. What we're presenting today was our where we left off back in 2016. We had extensive discussions with lots of the property owners. We wiggled the line quite a bit to try to avoid as many impacts as possible. But the exact configuration is still fluid. We're still open to input there and still open for better ideas.
Thank you. Could you tell me why they eliminated the ramp going east?
At Holly, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, that's because of how narrow it is there, and the actual width of an added lane. There just isn't room without hitting graves. So to honor a commitment back in the day, we decided. We didn't want to hit any graves. So the only way to do that again was either to eliminate those ramps or to double deck, and the cost of the double deck, was rejected. So the ramps themselves would physically be in the cemeteries, and that's the reason they were eliminated.
I see. Thank you, Brian.
Are there any other questions from the older people? Are there any other questions? If not, thank you for your presentation. We appreciate you spending the time with us to explain everything to us this evening. And I would then entertain a motion to adjourn.
Could I just make one last comment?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to thank the committee. I appreciate the opportunity. We're always looking, especially in this virtual world, we're always looking for new ways to connect with neighborhoods and people. So if you have any good suggestions there, we're definitely in a mode of outreach right now. We're trying to connect. We had a couple of neighborhood meetings that frankly weren't very well attended. I don't know if people are intimidated by the technology or just not that interested in our project, but we're looking for ways to connect. So if you hear of any ways, or if you know of any opportunities to present and answer questions about the project, we'd appreciate hearing from you. So thank you again.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Chair.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.